And so I actually am going to kick off this discussion. And Alexis, I would love to start with you. One, just about a little bit more about your background, but it would also be great as we've had discussions about why you were joining us and would love for you to share that.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Lorna. I am so excited to be here. Again, my name is Alexis Nicole. I am currently a NICU nurse, but like Lorna mentioned, I'm also a grad student. So I'm in school right now to become a neonatal nurse practitioner. And I'm so excited to be part of this talk because as a healthcare provider, I feel like, especially on my content, I focus a lot on nursing and schooling and things we experience in the workplace, but I don't necessarily get to talk much about finances, which is a huge part of it. I've been getting this question a lot. What made me start going into content creation? And initially, I was a consumer of all digital content. And so one day I just ran out of nursing content to consume. So I started to make my own. And my initial reasoning for making the platform, and to this day is my same motivation, but I really wanted to give real advice and feedback and share my real, raw, authentic journey to those wanting to go the nursing route and share my authentic experience with that. And so I'm so excited to be part of this chat as well to share some of my authentic experiences with my finances and also being a nurse in healthcare.
We so appreciate you joining us to talk about it all. And we're going to dig in. Sangeeta, I know we just talked about what we're going to cover today. Why don't you take the helm and let us know?
Yeah, absolutely. And Alexis, thank you for what you do. It is invaluable and so good to be sharing the screen with you. What we are going to talk about today is all about taking control of our finances. And it all starts with goals, right? What is important to you? Because when you think about building a money roadmap, it has to be what is most important to you. And so, as we talk about the money roadmap today, there are four main areas we'd like to focus on, and also talk about, what are the action steps one can take towards putting your money to the best work. And the four action steps we're going to focus on is first and foremost, taking inventory of your spending and spending and your saving, and starting from where you are, right? The next is all about managing debt, which so many of us are dealing with. And so we'll share some tips there. From there, we'll talk about helping your money work harder and getting ready for retirement. For some, it may feel near, for some of us, it may feel far, but we got to make sure our money is working hard for us. And also think about the career path to help maximize those opportunities. And how do you make your income grow? So I hope you're taking great notes. I am too. So let's dig right in.
Awesome. And Alexis, I know we talked about this when we had met. We talked about this when you think about the conversation of what Sangeeta just laid out and your own experience and money challenges. Do you feel like that we're going to cover the right things to tackle in this conversation?
Absolutely. I think every point she covered is something I personally am experiencing. So I don't feel like finances are just, working and then paying rent. My finances are very multifaceted. And right now, being a graduate student, I'm paying tuition. I also recently got engaged. So now I'm paying towards a wedding. I recently bought a home. So now I'm paying towards mortgage. So my finances are very multifaceted. I have experience with the debt as far as tuition, and allocating my money and trying to figure out the best plan of action as to where I can allocate my spending the best.
Awesome. So congratulations. And you have so many, I call them life events or life moments that are happening at once. And I love how you said that, which is like money is the foundation to really kind of help us do the things that we want to. And so we're gonna dig in. And Sangeeta, you just said start where you are, which I don't know if folks can see it back there, but it is my favorite phrase that I obviously have in the office because it's so important to do so. Sasha, let me come over to you. Sangeeta just said we're going to talk about saving and spending. How do we do that? What should we be thinking about?
So yes, Alexis and Sangeeta both brought up great points, and specifically, right, we have multifaceted life events, right? We have more multiple financial goals that we're trying to tackle, and creating that money roadmap is even more critical so that we can help make sure that our money is working hard for us towards those things. So how do we get started? There's really there's three steps that we want to take. And step number one, as Sangeeta mentioned, is it starts with what's important to us. So take a minute, write down what are your financial priorities and goals. And so, for example, right, with a patient, when you go in there, you're probably going to ask, "Hey, what's going on?" before you start suggesting a treatment plan. Similar concept with the money roadmap. So, in order for us to know where we're going, we got to identify what are we trying to accomplish. So, step number one of a money roadmap is what's important to you. What are your financial goals? Step number two, then, as Alexis has figured out, right, we got to make the most of our paychecks so that we can save money for a wedding, to pay for grad school, etc. So step number two is really figuring out where is the money going to come from every paycheck to fund those goals. And so here what you're seeing is our spending and saving guideline that we share at Fidelity. And it's really just to give you an idea of what maximizing your paycheck looks like so that we can both live today, right? Keep the roof over our heads, food in our bellies, but then also save and invest for our future. And we call this our 50-15-5 rule of thumb. So ideally, 50% of our take-home pay should go towards our essential expenses, housing, transportation, food, minimum payments on debts. Then ideally 15% between us and our employers should be going towards our future selves or retirement. Now, really quick, if 15% sounds and feels high, then simply start with what you can. And at minimum, you want to always save enough to receive 100% of your employer match. So for example, if your hospital matches dollar for dollar up to 6%, then at minimum, you always want to save or try and save 6% of your paycheck towards retirement so that you are receiving the full employer match. Now, in addition to retirement, another important destination on your money roadmap is your emergency savings. And Sangeeta, if you could share, what's our rule of thumb for that one?
Yeah, I mean, there's 5% there, but I think healthcare professionals of all other careers understand that life happens, right? Life happens. We have ER, we have people coming in. So think about your emergency savings. And, 5% is a great rule of thumb number. The way I also like to think about it is save enough for 3 to 6 months. And so take a few minutes to just document your essential expenses, right? Housing, electricity, food, transport. Tomorrow, if you have a flat tire and it results to something bigger, you want to make sure you've saved some away that you can take care of that unexpected. The other thing I like to remind people, and I've done this myself, is put that money in a separate account. That account cannot be touched unless it's an emergency. We don't go into the ER unless we have to. So let's put that aside and let's make sure that money is growing too, right? And let's make sure we have automated savings going into that account so that, we first pay ourselves for any emergency before we have everything else. So once you've taken care of it, I almost find it's liberating because the rest is available. And so that's really how I think it's so helpful to think about emergency savings.
Mm-hmm.
And Alexis, I think you do separate accounts. I know we had talked about this. Can you talk a little bit more about how you handle it?
Yes, I love what Sangeeta just mentioned about having a separate account and making sure you put a percentage of your paycheck away. Thinking back, it's almost embarrassing to say, but this is a very transparent moment. Before my fiance, I did not have a savings account. What I used to do was just not go below a certain number in my in my checkings account. And that was my savings. And I thought I was, doing my best. And I started dating my now fiance, and he brought it up. Oh, you should definitely have a separate savings account. And I'm like, you know what? That's actually a great idea. I don't know why I never thought of that myself, but like Sangeeta had mentioned, paying yourself first. So now what I do at the beginning of every month, whenever I receive my paycheck, I immediately transfer a percentage into that account. I don't even have to think about it. It's done automatically. And now that account is growing and growing and growing interest. Whereas if I were to keep that in my checking account, that it would get spent. I wouldn't make any money off of that money. And so having a separate account, I feel is crucial to savings and just being a better financial planner.
Thank you for sharing that with us, but I'll tell you, I didn't either. And I always go back to the fact that no one taught us this stuff unless you had a parent or a coworker who shared this. Those are the things you kind of learn through life, which is why we have these conversations to help others who may be in a similar spot just have those tips. So really appreciate it. I want to keep on going on this because I know there's a lot of questions coming in. I want to just cover the 30%. I think it's one of the most important parts when we can get there. So Sasha, can you just finish us off on the 30%?
Yes. So in theory, the remaining 30% of your paycheck, that's your fun money. That is your money to save or spend where and how you see fit. Now, from a financial professional's perspective, it's whatever is left over each month or each paycheck. That's where we find the money to save and invest towards your other financial goals, like a down payment on a house, a wedding, paying off student loan debt. Another point to keep in mind is that if you do live in a higher cost of living area, so for example, I live in Chicago, definitely not a low cost of living area, then you may need to allocate a little bit more of that discretionary cash towards your essentials. And then also just remember our 50, 15, 5, and 30, this is simply a guideline, and you may need to adjust it to really fit your own financial situation. But at least this gives you a place to start and somewhere to build.
So now I want to move along because I love a good guideline, but I also recognize within these guidelines, and Sangeeta, you mentioned it, and then Sasha, you just did, there's debt and how we manage debt. And if you can help share a little bit of thinking on that, Sasha, and what we should be thinking about to manage it, that would be great.
Yeah, so managing debt, not only did I personally have student loan debt when I came out of college, over almost $100,000, but managing debt is something that almost everyone is dealing with, whether it be those student loans that we all needed for, right, our education, our professional training, but then also, like Alexis, mortgage payment. You may have car loans and definitely even credit cards. So when it comes to managing debt, you always want to ensure that you're paying the minimums on time, every time, to protect your credit score. So that's first and foremost. Next, when it comes to managing debt, you want to identify where paying off debt fits in your financial priorities list. And so, for example, right, if you're like Alexis and you're juggling multiple financial priorities at once, then you'll want to prioritize those goals from top priority on down, just in case your paycheck suggests that you may only be able to focus on one or two financial goals at a time. So if paying off debt is a high priority for you, then here you're seeing we do have some high level guidelines to help you. So as we already mentioned, making your minimum payments, you do, like Sangeeta was mentioning, you do want to establish that emergency fund just in case. And then we want to obtain our full retirement employer match. And once we have those three things in place, then we want to focus on any high interest debts first. So for example, the ones that have interest rates of 6% or higher. And then we want to turn towards our other money goals. Specifically, we would want to weigh whether it makes sense to pay down debt versus invest for those other goals. And what you're seeing here is when we're making the decision of paying down debt or investing, I do get that question a lot. And there's really two approaches to that question. What does your head say about it? And then what does your heart say about it? So in other words, right, there's both a quantitative way and a qualitative way to answer the question of, should I save or invest the money? So again, think about delivering that treatment plan to your patients. Would that patient you're talking to, would they better understand the benefits of the treatment you're proposing if you present research and or would they better understand the benefits if you help them visualize how they'll feel after the treatment and during the treatment? Very, very similar concept here. So if we're evaluating paying off debt from a number side of things, then you'll want to list out all of your debts, including the interest rates that you're paying for each. And as a general guideline, you want to focus on paying down those debts with an interest rate of 6% or higher before saving and investing towards other goals. Now, on the flip side, right, if your heart is saying it's more important for you to have a wedding in 2 years, buy a house within 5 years, then those could be the qualitative reasons why we lengthen our debt payoff goal. And so when it comes to prioritizing debt, that's a little bit of a guideline for how you can approach that decision. And by all means, you're not alone in figuring it out. That's the benefit of working with the planner to help you navigate that decision.
Thank you. The head and the heart on debt, but the guideline is really very, very helpful. Kayleen and a number of other folks are asking in the chat about one particular area of debt, which is student debt. Sangeeta, these people are not alone. Big. Can you talk a little bit about student debt and what the options are to get some help?
Yeah, having had 2 young adults graduate, I know personally about student debt and having talked to many of their friends. But you know what is wonderful is that women are out earning men, both in undergrad and graduate and undergraduate degrees, which is awesome. I feel so proud. But also, women end up carrying more debt. 2/3 of student loans are in the US are carried by women. And so it's something, we hear a lot about from women, especially in healthcare, about how do I start thinking about this debt? And you could have multiple loans, right? And it's not always easy to know which one do I pay down, when do I pay down. And like Sasha said, it is so important for you all to know that Fidelity has some amazing tools and resources, so you should never feel like you have to do this alone. And I'm glad you have the link up. Please save this link and look at it and make sure you use it. What you can do is you can input your loan or loans and start a dashboard to say what are all the loans you have. And then, there's a tool that can help you work at different scenarios. And it's so important that you take a look at these resources and strategies, because that's where you can then start to say, what's the best debt? What's the best sequence? Which is the debt I need to pay down? How much should I be paying down? How much should I be investing instead? And how do I balance those 2 goals? And that's where it's so important to really think about this in the context of your overall financial wellness. And what I'd encourage everyone to do is check out our Check Your Vitals website, because this will help you really think about how to balance all these factors. But Alexis, you've been through this. So please chime in and tell us how you manage this balancing act.
Right. So I think this is great that we're having this conversation. I wish this whole conversation was offered as a how to be an adult course, because this is a lot of what I didn't know coming out of school with student debt. I really didn't know what to do about my debt, how to go about tackling that. And when I first started my first job as a registered nurse, I had just turned 22. So very, very young. And I actually opted out of putting money towards my retirement fund, because at that age, I'm thinking, oh, of course I want more money in my bank account. Why would I want to give more money away when I'm not going to see it? Looking back now, I want to cringe that I made that decision, but it was because it was a uninformed decision. And so I just simply didn't know any better. And I like what you and Sasha both mentioned about having goals, because that's how I deal with my finances now. My finances are very goal driven and goal oriented. I think it's so much easier to have a plan and a plan of action when you have a goal in mind. So I like to create goals that have a number associated with it versus saying, I want to save a lot of money this year. That's great, but it's going to be hard to reach your destination of a lot of money if you don't know exactly what that is. And so instead of saying that, I'll throw out a rough estimate. I want to save $10,000 this year. So I can break that $10,000 into, okay, I'll put away this much every single month to reach this goal at the end of the year. And that's with savings, that's with paying towards my debt, with allocating money towards wedding, allocating money towards mortgage. Everything has a number associated to it. And I've found that for myself, having a goal for my money has made it easier to manage it.
I really like that approach. I appreciate you sharing what you call your cringe moment, but I have to tell you, so many of us later in our career than you, like, really are, didn't know, right? Maybe made those similar decisions. And so I always go back to this, start where you are. And I just think it's so awesome of like what you figured out over the past several years to get your financial house in order. I'm glad that we covered the student debt tool because it's magnificent. It's really wonderful and makes things much easier, particularly with some of us who have, 7 to 9 loans that we're dealing with. But I also know that there's other workplace benefits. And Sangeeta, I know you day in and day out, you focus on this. Can you talk about other sources of help that may be available?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important. I did cringe when you said that, Alexis. So thank you for being open and vulnerable enough to share. But the more familiar you are with your company benefits, the fewer cringe moments we create. And it's so valuable because as I talk to companies, as I talk to organizations, and I just this morning was speaking to several healthcare and other organizations, they are really focused on expanding the benefits that they want to bring to their employees. They understand what an important role benefits play in you choosing where you want to work. And benefits can include not just retirement and health benefits, but caregiving resources. People can get help with childcare, with elder care. You can get health and wellness support. You can get legal services. You can get help with paying off your student loans. You can get help with professional development opportunities. So make sure that you take the time to understand those benefits. I have so often talked to people like myself who are in the sandwich generation, having young adults and parents that they're taking care of, where they might choose to step away from a job. And I'm like, have you seen if you have elder care benefits? Because when you're stepping away, you're giving up so much, not just retirement savings, future growth opportunities. So I really encourage you all to take this time. And Alexis, I would love to hear from you. Like, what are some of the benefits that you are offered that maybe you looked at and maybe were surprised or talked to your peers about that could be really valuable?
So you used a great word, which is surprise, which is exactly how I felt when I found some of these benefits. And so I think in your personal financial health, I think you have to be an advocate of yourself. And I think that's across the board as far as advocate for yourself and your job and in every facet of your life. But I also think you need to advocate for yourself by going and researching benefits that are available to you. And it wasn't until I took that step and dived into deeper to see what is available to me that I found some really, really beneficial benefits for me that really made a big change in my life. And one of the main things that I took advantage of was free therapy sessions. As healthcare workers, our mental health is priority. We deal with a lot of heavy situations, a lot of sad situations, a lot of heavy moments, a lot of happy moments, but there is a lot of stress that comes with being a healthcare provider. And there's no better way to take care of your health by taking care of your mental status. And so when I found these free therapy resources, I thought that was amazing. And I took advantage of it fully. Another benefit I found was free subscription services to meditation apps. And there is so much out there still that I haven't necessarily taken advantage of absolutely everything, but these are two of the biggest things that I've taken advantage of that have made a big difference in my day-to-day life.
You know, I started out talking about how this was about investing in ourselves and our financial well-being, but I love that you are bringing in our mental and total well-being because it's all linked together and so important. And those benefits are just so critical for us all around. And so thank you for sharing that. We covered we covered kind of saving and spending and getting our, you know, what we do with our paycheck in order. We also talked about debt and managing debt and student debt. And I'm still watching some of the questions coming in. But actually, when we first jumped on in the chat, what I really saw was about how do we maximize our potential to grow our money. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. And there's two things I want to talk about. So one is our careers and how we can, you know, grow our career and get on the best career path, because that in itself, it gives the potential to earn more as one way to kind of maximize our potential. So Alexis, given your experience, what are any recommendations or opportunities you've been provided when it comes to, you know, thinking about your career and your career path?
Well, the first thing I think of when I think of career development is I made the decision to go back to school. So that is currently what I'm working on, my master's degree, to develop my career to the next level. But that doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay. There's a multitude of different ways to advance your career without having to go back to school. So speaking specifically to nurses here, one of the best options you have to advance your career is getting certifications. You know, these are exams that you can study for that are specific to the field you work in, that a lot of companies will pay you more hourly that if you have this certification, which I think not only is that beneficial to you financially, but that's also beneficial to you knowledge-wise. You know, knowledge is power, and investing in yourself is never going to be wrong. I always encourage investing in your knowledge. There's also certain things you can do, like joining committees on your unit, joining different practice councils, joining different teams, transport teams, line teams, pick line teams. There are so many different committees that you can join and participate in without having to leave your unit or without having to go back to school.
Thank you. And I know, Sangeeta, we talk about this a lot when it comes to career and a big focus on knowing our worth and advocating for ourselves. Any tips that you'd like to share?
I would say I echo everything you said, Alexis, which is, you know, we women tend to do such a great job of advocating for others. I think what we have to remind ourselves is, how do you know your worth? And having that knowledge is so powerful. And then how do you advocate for yourself first? You know, I try to remind myself every morning that you cannot give out of an empty cup. And so you've got to fill that cup first and make sure your voice is heard. And, you know, putting yourself out there and having your voice heard is not something that you can turn on and off. It's a skill you build. But I hope what you find from this community and other communities is, how do you make sure your voice is heard and bringing your voice forward? The other thing I always tell people when it goes back to career, like you were talking about, Alexis, there's so many ways to think about it, to get professional education, to invest in more education. But it's also so important to make sure that in your work setting, your worth is known to the people you're working with. And so I always say to people, you know, it's not just your manager's job to manage you. It is your job to manage your manager as well. And what I mean by that is, it is so important for you to advocate for yourself and make sure your manager understands how you're adding value. Because, you know, he or she, they may not always have understood that clearly. So make sure you're advocating, make sure you're filling your cup and filling your manager's cup by helping them understand. And from there, you may have other opportunities that open up. So don't feel like you're ever on this path alone, but it is important that you advocate for yourself. And that gives other people around you also the power and the permission to advocate for themselves.
So I have to say, I love this, both the career advice from both of you, and a number of questions are coming in. So we've got career, and we're going to look at how do we advocate for ourselves, do more, join more to grow our careers. Now, the one question came in really early, which is how do I just make my money work harder? So I think it was from Tanya. So kudos, Tanya, because that's the language I like to use, and different accounts and through investing. So Sangeeta, can you start to talk about, our options and our path, how we think about making our money work harder?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, I was going to talk about women in general. What research shows us that women traditionally are savers. Well, I work in the financial services company and I have been here for 28 years, and I'm a good saver, but I am not a great risk taker. And so while I didn't put that money under the pillow, I was not really taking good care of my money. And so what I would make sure everyone here is thinking about is not just saving, but also taking the next step to make sure you're investing in that money, right? So you are making that money work for you. Just saving is never going to be enough. I mean, just think about it. When you think about inflation and taxes, you could actually, if you're not saving in a proper savings vehicle, you could actually be losing your money. And what I mean by that is your money is not growing at the same rate the inflation is growing. And so it is so important that you're thinking about investing. And I know, Sasha, this is something you do each and every day. So talk about how do you help people make their money work?
So I definitely do talk about putting money to work every single day. But really quick, Sangeeta, I wanted to point out a really key concept that you mentioned, which is the distinction between saving and investing money, which a lot of times those two words are definitely used interchangeably. But as you mentioned, inflation, taxes, in practice, they have very, very different meanings. And here's an example of what that looks like. Now, the numbers here, it's not critical. It's simply an illustration to help us show what the opportunity is. So here we're seeing 4 different examples, and I'm just going to talk you through that first one on the far left. So here's the difference between saving and investing money. So let's say you have $5,000 that you want to invest or that you want to save towards some financial goal. The blue bar there represents you leaving that $5,000 in a savings account for 10 years, earning very low end. On the other hand, the purple bar represents you putting that money to work by investing it for 10 years using a conservative investment mix of stocks, bonds, and cash. And this is the key difference between saving and investing money. Now, really quick poll question. Which scenario do you think, right, can help you accomplish your goals faster? Now, if you have more than $5,000 in your bank account, then you can definitely see other examples modeled here. And even though we use these different dollar amounts as examples, please know that you don't need a lot of money to get started. At Fidelity, you can get started with investing with as little as $1. So please don't let dollar amounts get in the way of putting your money to work.
I'll tell you, this is definitely the kick in the pants slide. Every time I see it, it reminds me to get more comfortable and make sure that it's happening. And I definitely, work to kind of automate. And investing, I just want to say, is there are a lot of different options. I think you hit on that. There are options, which I, like you said, which can be very conservative for those of us, like Sangeeta mentioned, who may be a little more risk aware. I think about that. Alexis, I'm curious around how you learned about investing and if this gives you a kick in the pants.
Yeah, definitely. When you see these numbers, it's kind of very eye-opening. I always talk about how growing up, money was very taboo and we just didn't speak a whole lot about it. You never asked anyone how much they made. You never talked about how much money you had. And so my financial knowledge just wasn't there. And so that's why I made the decision when I first started working as a nurse to opt out of putting money towards my 403B. And now that I have seen a little bit more of what it means to be financially savvy and have felt the effects of it, I'm definitely a lot more passionate about it. As far as learning more about, investments and things like that, it's my first financial decision, I say, was making that investment to put money towards my 403b and have my hospital match up to that percent. And every year I've increased it, and just seeing the difference in how my money works when it's in something that's making more money versus having money sit in my bank account. Once you start seeing that difference, it, for me, it started this fire under me and started the desire to dive into deeper education on how I can learn more about this and what else I can do and how else I can benefit myself. Because like Sasha said, when you have money just sitting in a bank account and it's not doing anything, nothing's going to come out of it. But you can take that same amount of money and put it towards something that's going to give you something more in return. Why wouldn't you?
I
And a
love
lot
that.
of
Hey,
times,
Sasha, I know I know a number of people are asking about just how investing options. We have a few other topics to cover. So I just wanted, if we can cover the options more quickly, that way we can also address some of the other questions coming in. That'd be great.
yeah, absolutely. And Alexis, like you mentioned, if you have an employer plan, you're already an investor. And so, yes, investing can feel overwhelming because there's a lot of choice and new terminology. And so, really, there's two key decisions that you want to make when it comes to getting started with investing. First is what type of account to use, and the second is what kind of investment strategy will help you reach your goals. And investing can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. We at Fidelity a few different investment styles. On the one end, we have do-it-yourselfers who feel very confident in picking their own investments online, just need help with tools and resources, which we have. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have investors who prefer to delegate that responsibility and work with a financial professional through the entire planning process and additionally with the investing side of things. And then in between those two, right? So do it yourself, completely hands off. We also have investors that are somewhere in between, want a hybrid approach. So maybe you would utilize something like a target date retirement fund, like you would find in a lot of our employer retirement accounts. And then you can also utilize a robo advisor or a very low cost digital advisor that will help you create that investment strategy based on your goals, timeline, and comfort level with the market ups and downs.
Quick and comprehensive, and all options are available. But I think most important also is if you don't know, you can call and you can get someone like a Sasha to help. We are pinning the phone number. Oh, and it's even coming up on the screen, just so that everybody has it, because reaching out for help is free. And it is something that we encourage. And I know for me, when I got started, that's what I did. And I didn't know earlier that it was available. Talk about another early cringe mode. I had no idea. Sangeeta, we talk about this a lot, right?
We do. And you know what? I'd like to remind people, like, if you have car issues, you're not going to fix your car unless it's like maybe you have a spare tire and you just have to replace the tire, but you'll take it to a mechanic. If you have health issues, you go to a doctor. How can you not take care of your finances? To me, it is not a negotiable thing. And, you know, like I was telling you earlier, I've been in financial services for a long, long time, but I have made a deliberate choice to say, I personally cannot take enough time to take care of my money. So what have I done? I've asked a professional to help me. And you don't, like Sasha said, you don't need a lot of money to get help. There is help. And so please get the help. It is absolutely and critically important, and it's free. So please write down the number and make sure you call.
Thank you for sharing that. We've got a few minutes left, and I was thinking Janine's from the beginning, wanted to make sure to get to your question around making your money work outside of investment accounts. So Sasha, I know we talked about investing, usually 3+ years. What are options to make my money work harder if it's under 3 years?
So for short-term goals, very similar to Alexis, right? When your fiance gave you that aha moment of a checking versus a savings account, when you have those shorter-term financial priorities, then you want to consider a high interest or high yield savings account. One example could be a cash management account. You could also look at a brokerage account and utilizing what's called money market funds, which both of those account types definitely are providing higher interest rates than we've seen in years. So key takeaway there is check on your current account where you have cash. If you are not earning interest, then please use this as your little nudge to compare and explore other options. And again, we're here to help you if you need it.
And Alexis, I know for you, I think we talked about this was kind of like a game-changing moment for you to see the difference in those types of accounts.
Mhm. Yes, and also something that we have done recently, we started working with a financial advisor, and I think it's definitely been something that's eye-opening. And I always talk about this because I definitely felt this, but I felt like I needed to reach a certain status with my money or reach a certain number before I could even think about investing. But now looking back, if I have $10, I can do something with that, whether that's putting it in a high yield savings account or what have you. But it's just getting rid of that misconception that I needed a certain amount of money or I needed to feel rich or be rich before I could start having my money work for itself.
That is such a good myth buster, which is we all think we need to have so much money, and actually it's not. There's help for everybody. So thank you for breaking that down. I know we're coming up close to time, but I do want to make sure we at least touch a bit on, we've got a few folks who are nearing retirement and want to make sure we cover what they should be thinking about because there's a few questions coming in. Sangeeta, can you tackle that for us?
Sure. One of the most common questions we get when people are approaching retirement is, have I saved enough? And Alexis, you made such a great point about we have these myths in our head about when can I talk to somebody. And sometimes you're like, what question can I even ask? But get to a financial planner and tell them you're closer to retirement. And what they'll help you think about is, first and foremost, how much money will you need to basically keep the lifestyle you have, right? How much of your current income will you need? But also what the financial professional can help you walk through about is, how have you planned for taking care of healthcare cost? Are there Medicare options you should be thinking about? Understanding Social Security and when do you take advantage of those benefits? Also planning for your family. Is there estate planning you need to think about? Are there wills you need to bring together? And I think that is really why it's so important not to both think about how much you need, but also what are these other options that you need to be mindful about.
Very helpful. And we're coming up to close, but I think it's so important we've covered so much. And I'd like to just bring up a slide. Typically people take a snapshot of it, but it's to help regardless of what your stage you're at. So if you're starting out, if you're mid-career or you're nearing retirement, these are just some of the recommended steps that you can take so that you can continue to achieve great financial well-being. And I think going back to which helps with your overall well-being. This is also downloadable. So if at the link below, all the slides that we've shared and the tools you can get access to. I also want to just remind folks, we pin the links in the chat as well so that they can have them. I also want to make sure, because today was such a wonderful conversation, I will tell you it went by quickly. I see the questions continuing to pour in and we'll continue to try to answer them with the teams behind the scenes. But what's great is that we have conversations like this all the time and it is available for everybody. So on the right, this is part of our Women Talk Money community. If you've joined us for the first time today and are not a member, we have workshops, these type of discussions going deep on everything from starting to invest to planning for retirement income, and career. So please join us. Going back to the left, Sasha is a great example of someone who works with people every day, one-on-one, to help them figure out their money roadmap, as well as plan for retirement. And you can give us a call, as we mentioned, on any of these questions. If you get stuck, you just need to know what's important to you and what you're trying to achieve. So not a lot of preparation. And the number, you can actually schedule a discussion, or you can call 866-30-9720. And of course, Sangeeta earlier, I believe, mentioned our Check Your Vitals website, which is fidelity.com. Check Your Vitals. It is chock full of what we covered today, with access to get into some of the tools as well as additional resources. Is there a follow-up? Last but not least, I really want to take a moment to thank Sangeeta, Sasha, and Alexis, particularly. Thank you for sharing your journey, for being so open with us and sharing what we call them sometimes like our money moments, money mistakes. The reality is we all have them and we've all learned. And when we can share with one another and learn from one another, we're able to help people do better. And that's what this is about, in supporting one another. So thank you so much. And for everyone in the audience who stayed on, thank you for what you do. We are grateful and we hope that this helped you all. And hopefully we'll see you in the community. Have a great day.